We take a variety of measures here at the GCHSR to see how the brain responds to sounds. In one of our recent studies that's part of the NIH program grant is looking at how the brain responds to complex sounds such as speech. So we use the ASSR, the auditory steady state response, to give us information about temporal coding using a mouse model of aging, which has never been done before. We know that studies of this sort are imperative because over half of our elderly population have a hearing loss that is debilitating and affects their daily living. It is an incredible feeling to know that the research we do here at the GCHSR can impact the lives of millions. And I have seen research transpire clinically that the impact not only reaches the patient that we're caring for, but it's also for their loved ones. And communication is essential across all age ranges. And here at the GCHSR, we want to do our part to provide individuals with a better quality of life.
My current research project is done in conjunction with other undergraduate students, and we're trying to implement a 3D bioprinting method that allows for vascularization of thick tissue constructs, and it goes along the lines of trying to fabricate a capillary network of some sort, or at least developing one through angiogenesis, that allows cells to proliferate and create its own vascular network. Because the issue currently in modern tissue engineering is the inability to vascularize these tissues and keep them viable for long periods of time. If you can accomplish that, then that means that you can graft on these sorts of tissues in various components of the body, and with this said vascularization, it will remain viable for a long period of time. So we're trying to research a way to form these capillaries in order to allow the diffusion of nutrients and oxygen, and thereby keeping these tissue constructs viable. In terms of hearing loss, it happens to everyone, and there are a lot of factors involved with age-related hearing loss and communication disorders as a whole, and it plays a major factor in our everyday lives because communication is one of the only ways that we can interact with each other. So trying to break down the barriers involved with hearing loss and speech communication disorders and deficits allows humans to not only progress further, because it allows the humans with hearing loss to be able to hear once again. And obviously this sort of research is exciting and enthralling because it allows people in a clinical aspect to experience hearing once again. So imagine for a moment that somebody personal to you was affected with age-related hearing loss and they couldn't hear you anymore. If we had the solutions that we are currently projecting as of current, well, you can interact with them once again, and that is what drives us forward. Just the fact that we are working to help people in that tangible setting.
Our mission at the Global Center is to advance knowledge about hearing loss, deafness, speech problems, and our mission is transforming now more into a translational phase where we're trying to take the knowledge that we've learned in the past and apply it to clinical problems of hearing impairment, deafness, and speech disorders. We've been fortunate. We've had some great discoveries. We were one of the first groups to identify the first gene that can contribute or cause age-related hearing loss. We've come up with new drugs to slow down the rate and progression of age-related hearing loss. We've been testing a new drug lately that can prevent some key aspects of noise-induced hearing loss. And we do produce patents that have been worked through the University of South Florida Tech Transfer Office. And some of the other patents have to do with new ways of programming or designing hearing aids in order to help older people, let's say, because there actually aren't that many hearing aids that are specifically designed for older people. And then we've really, one of our strengths has been when we look at the auditory system, the hearing system, we look at both the inner ear, where the sound gets transformed into the code of the nervous system. We also look at the parts of the brain used for hearing. And that's very difficult to do. And so we've been able to relate what goes on in the inner ear and then changes that occur in the brain as well. Well, for students, we have students working in our center at both undergraduate and graduate levels. So we have undergrad research projects, honors projects, we have master's thesis, we have PhD dissertation. We have students that come from communication sciences, audiology, speech. We also have students that come from engineering, typically biomedical engineering, but also sometimes electrical, mechanical, chemical. And one of the great things about our center here at USF is we are in a real supportive environment for getting even undergraduates involved in research. So I would advise students, especially undergrads, to get involved early, like during your first year, because then you can often work in the summers a lot, and then you can build up a project where you would have great things like going to international meetings and journal article publications, which usually take a few years or a couple years to do. So if you get started early, and don't be afraid. We all have anxiety when we do new things, but research, you have to do new things all the time. So a little bit of anxiety is good, it gets your hormones and juices flowing. But once you get into the research, it really oftentimes becomes fun and you get over this anxiety. So you got to take that first plunge and find a good professor here at USF, which there are a lot of who are willing and able to have undergrads work in their labs. And some of the same principles apply to grad students as well.
So currently the project I'm working on right now that I'm very excited about is that I'm detecting different genes and protein levels of potential candidates that could affect the hearing capabilities. It's very interesting because these different genes and proteins are key for regulating hearing processes, and we would like to know if we can design certain delivery systems, drug delivery systems, gene therapies, cell therapies to improve the quality of living for those at a disadvantage with their hearing. Some advice I have for potential graduate students would be to ask a whole bunch of questions to your advisor, to your colleagues, your friends, your family. Definitely reach out to your support system and just always ask questions. If you're unsure, there's never any bad questions.
So the mission of my laboratory is basically to understand the neural basis of age-related hearing loss and other hearing disorders. The lab is comprised of 2 units, comparative behavior lab and then neurophysiology and neural engineering lab. Those 2 labs work in concert with one another because one of the goals of neuroscientists are to understand the neural basis of perception, in our case, and to then look at ways in which we can improve disorders of hearing. So the multidisciplinary emphasis is really comprised of 3 major components. One is we're interested in behavior, in the sense of how hearing loss and hearing disorders affect perception in both humans and animal models. Secondly, we're interested in what the neural basis of that hearing disorder causes in the central nervous system. So if you have hearing loss or ringing in the ears, which is clinically termed tinnitus, how does that appear in the neural signature of the brain? And then the final component is a molecular biology component. How can we understand the molecular basis of those changes? And all of that is important in order to come up with treatments, which we're interested in. In my lab, we've successfully trained up to over 100 undergrad students, as well as many master students. And as an undergrad interested in the medical profession or in graduate school, undergraduate research is a key component to that process. And it is extremely important that undergrads have the ability and have the opportunity to engage in research, and our labs are open to that at every level. Go Bulls!